Welcome everybody, and welcome Paul. How are you?
Hi. I learnt that COVID wave from Dirk.
Now what's this? What's this?
This
This
is my football scarf. We are the Navy Blues, the Carlton Football Club, established 1864. And this one was a special edition from 1914, celebrating 150 years. That is even older than Dirk and myself
combined. Yeah. Actually, I should have my Bombers one.
You should.
Because actually, with the Bombers one, I should have bought it when they were in that crisis, because they had the best slogan, whatever it takes. They got into so much trouble.
And for the uninitiated, Australian rules football, Australia's game. But that's another debate. We're here to share on the goodness of God.
Goodness of God. Well, actually, about the goodness of God, how did actually we meet? That was a bit of an interesting thing about the goodness of God, wasn't it?
Well, it certainly was. People might think, well, who's this bloke sitting next to Dirk? Well, a little bit of history. Back in early 2018, we met at Luther Heights.
Of all places.
Up at Coolum, on a retreat type of thing, a self-care program for our graduate diploma in counselling. And so that's where I met Dirk and Penny, and we've come on this journey together where, lo and behold, mid-2019, after well over a year since we met, Dirk left the Gold Coast to come to Toowoomba. We were living in Murwillumbah, in the Tweed Valley, to move to Warwick. Well, we have this wonderful connection that has continued.
Isn't it?
And here we are 2.5 years later, in the goodness of God.
Well, I just want to pause there, because one of the interesting things is that when Paul actually came up to this area, we actually caught up at Sizzler for a bit of a lunch.
Yes.
And you looked not well, let's put it this way. There was a lot of stuff going on in your life, and suddenly you came down with a huge reaction against
some
medication, wasn't it? And your bone marrow, I think, was depleted. You were in intensive care.
Yes, intensive care in bad way, in isolation room up at Toowoomba base.
Touch and go.
And you good people at Living Grace prayed for me, had visits, and so we've had this good connection.
Laid on hands to pray for you.
Yes.
And you got well, because here's living proof.
Here I am, back up here at Toowoomba, just to come and share and fellowship.
So here we are tonight. This is actually the evening when we had our prayer time, and you've been in ministry. Edgar was good enough to get you straight into ministry.
Yes.
And pray for healing. We're looking for great things there. But the amazing thing is, when you came up here, and our personal connection has actually grown far beyond that, because you're actually connecting to Living Grace. Even though there were a number of little ties, this is actually now something that is actually a bit more intentional, isn't it?
Yes, it is intentional. I mean, look, we don't say, people have asked, are you going to start a church in Warwick? Are you going to pastor a church? Well, we don't need more churches as we know it, but we need places where people can connect with God.
Yeah.
And so what I've observed and what I know is people need is healing of heart, healing of soul, healing of mind, healing of body. And so what has been turned a mini branch can start in Warwick.
Yeah.
We're looking at more formalising that, getting it so it's not going to be on a Sunday morning or anything like that.
Doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be.
Suits.
Maybe on a Saturday afternoon, so that it doesn't impact too much on people's lives. We'll work through that. But it's a place to say, look, we're here, you want to come, we can do all sorts of things. I if people were teaching on Levitical laws, I could do that. But I don't know whether
what's to have Levitical laws?
Whether that is going to impact greatly on people's lives, or the travails of Job. However, people want to come for soaking in God's presence. People want to come And here's
relationship, fellowship with one another. You know, the thing is that, you know, when you're talking about healing in body and soul and in spirit, about how important it is actually that always happens in fellowship with others.
Yes.
You know, for instance, when you're talking about healing, you need a doctor, right? You need an outside influence to help you heal. But in prayer, it's the same.
Yes.
It's that, you know, when we have issues in our lives, we need one another. God has actually created us for fellowship, for community, and these mini branches, wherever they will pop up and whatever time that they will meet, is a great place to draw people together, so that they can care for one another, look out for one another, connect, and especially that whole thing about enjoying God's presence.
Yes.
What you were saying before.
Yes. And it's something actually that I've been actually learning. I've just recently started my master's, and it's about, there's been a lot of discussion about entering into God's presence, contemplating on His goodness. And so when we have that focus on the blessing of God, the goodness of God, good things happen.
Yeah.
Healing happens.
Yeah. And you know, that I find what we're talking about right now, that there's a place where you can enjoy God's blessings as well as the blessing of other people.
Yes.
And you intentionally make that happen. And it's like, you know, every time we come to church, it's not the way that we started, but at the altar, at the pulpit, is the quote from John 15 where it says, "I'm the vine and you are the branches."
Yes.
And I had someone actually share with me a vision just now when we finished off our prayer time. And they said, saw the vine having lots of branches going out all over the place and filling the ground with all these vines. And I said, oh, isn't that wonderful? Because it's great to see that, you know, in the vision, people are starting to see that we need these branches, these vine and branches connection everywhere, even in Warwick. And so if you're in Warwick, if you're seeing this and you're in the area of Warwick, here's your man. Connect with Paul and say, hey, I'd love to join your group.
Yes, talk to Dirk. He's got my details.
Yeah.
So
and you'll get some counselling as well.
You could get some counselling as well. I have to say to people sometimes, I'm not psychoanalyzing you.
Yeah.
But sometimes I am.
But you know, here's the other thing, the spin off all of this is that we started off the counselling practice here as well.
Yes.
And Paul was saying, hey, I can actually come down here maybe one a day or something. Of course, COVID then came in and everything went flat for a while. But as things progress, I mean, I think God is knitting people together. He's certainly done that in us.
Yes.
And I find that that's a divine thing too. You know, vines actually intermingle.
They do, yes. And we, you know, I'll leave you with this scripture. It's from Book of Proverbs, chapter 18, verse 1. It says, a man, woman, and it says man, it means woman too. A man who isolates himself rages against all wisdom.
Oh.
Now, that's New King James Version. You can look up different other translations. They all have slightly different spins on it. But the central core is you are not properly grafted into that vine as a branch if you're
in isolation
out in the back paddock.
Yeah.
You know, having wild pigs chase after you. When you are grafted into the vine, you are being wise. So if you isolate yourself, if you're not part of these of a branch, however that looks, I think the Living Grace model is pretty good. You're raging against all wisdom.
Yeah.
So you are going against God's plans.
Wow. Just to have a look at that for yourself. Where was that?
Proverbs 18 verse 1. It's a favourite scripture of mine. I've shared it, especially with men's groups.
Yeah.
Men, we like to be lone rangers.
Yeah.
And so when we start grafting ourselves in, we are using God's wisdom.
Isn't that wonderful? You know, when you're isolated, you rage against that wisdom.
Yes.
When you grafted yourself in, you enjoy the flow of God's wisdom.
Exactly.
And so, what a good word, hey? Oh, awesome. So, Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
pleasure.
Blessings to everyone. And we do the morning chat wave. Bye, everyone.
Bye.